Yeah.
Because don't know what.
We had an avocado tree come up out there.
All right.
It didn't do well.
Oh.
But
No, they
we
said
tried.
they don't like the cold at all.
Your wife asked me to ask you about agricultural lime because I need to put it down in my dog run to kill the smell.
That's hydrated lime.
Hydrated lime.
Agricultural lime is like for pH or soil.
Okay.
Hydrated lime is like old fashioned lime.
Yes, powdery.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I need.
That's what you need.
I need.
All right.
What kind of lime was that again? For
Hydrated lime.
hydrated. I need to hydrate. So I gotta go back to your place and get it. I'm gonna get started
You're
on that
welcome.
job.
Guess we will get cruising along today. So good afternoon. I'm about to say good morning. So today we're going to talk about getting ready for spring. So garden's obviously right upon us. It's warm outside. Everybody's ready to go. I know I am. So I'm going to talk a lot about today of kind of the journey that I take and that I utilize to ensure that I'm as successful as I can be in the spring. So we're going to cover some tactics, some very simple concepts, but I bring them up because I think that they have big impact, and they're the things that people often put to the wayside. It's 2026, time flies, life flies, we're busy. You know, planning and thinking is not always at the forefront of gardening. So we're going to talk a lot about planning and preparing today. We're not going to talk about specifics of what to plant when, really. That's, you know, that's a topic that we could debate all day long amongst ourselves about what's the best time. But I'm going to give you some key things here to have the best garden that you can this spring. So the things that we're going to cover most, there's some extras in here this year. We're going to cover first, we've got to clean up and we've got to prepare the space. Second, we've got to plan and seed. Those two things go hand in hand, because if you don't plan ahead, then you can't properly seed to plant at the right time. Next, we've got to actually do the planting, installation, maintaining, and repairing things that are commonplace items that we need to be successful as gardeners in our space. And lastly, we're going to talk about protecting and planting. Protection is probably one of my favorite topics in this talk today, because it's what I believe will yield you an early season success. So, first thing is not in my little timeline here. It's about thinking about timing. So we live in a very unique place in the world of microclimates. It's all over the place. It's cold, it's hot, it's humid. It's never dry in a sense. So it's unique that our season is different than most other areas that are in Zone 9A. Zone 9A spans all across the world in a sense. But what we deal with here is not the same as people in even Beaumont, Houston, that are still in that same zone. It's slightly different. So we have to keep that in mind. So one of the things that we're going to look at first is talking about timing. So the first thing in timing is going to be soil preparation. So today it's Valentine's Day. Ideally, we already want to have our soil prepared. So I'm kind of late to the game this year as far as doing this talk. But we want to be prepping our soil, prepping our space, and everything that we need in January and February. And as I mentioned, life moves fast. So oftentimes we're doing this at the very last second, the day we're going to plant, the day before, the week of, and there's always things we're going to miss. So had we not had the really, really cold weather at the end of January and the beginning of this month, my space at home probably would have already been completely prepped. But I'm behind. I've already started clipping back my plants and such. But we've got to be mindful and we've got to be prepared, because what we're looking at, everybody all wants to worry about when is the last frost. And that's subjective. Doesn't mean that the last frost date documented online or in resources and publications does not mean that's the true last frost date. we all know we could get a cold snap right before Easter. Anything is possible here. Ideally, when we're thinking in a bigger picture, the last frost date usually is going to be around the end of February by historical data. Doesn't mean it always is, but usually this year, everything I could find said 226. Maybe, who knows? Why that's important is because we need to look at what our seasons actually are. How many seasons do we have?
2.
3 years.
3 here in Texas.
So science
It's
says
supposed to be having 4, but.
science says we have 4, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're always taught we have 4 seasons. And yes, there are 4 seasons, but in our specific area, we have 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And what you see in this little arc here, we have the months. And then above, we have our season labels. So we have cool season, warm season, hot season, back to warm season, and then we finish our year out as we move into the holidays at the beginning of our cold season, or cool season. We don't have a cold season here. So we're not dealing with like extreme cold. We get, you know, really like adverse cold snaps in short periods of time of that weather. But ideally, this little chart here, I put this up here so you can understand, even though we're talking spring today, part of this talk is about planting. You should be able to ideally plan your garden for the entire year and have something growing in the beds or your rows or whatever you're doing year round. There's always something that can be planting. So we're going to talk a little bit about timing and planting, because when we reach this circled area where we're in May to June, this is when we make that transition from warm to hot season. And what happens when we get to the hot season?
Everything
Thing
gets
dies.
distressed.
Stress, dry, and
Bugs.
that leads to bugs. That leads to more disease pressure, because it's
Mhm.
when we get really, really hot, what also gets really, really high? Humidity.
Yeah.
Everybody hates the humidity. Plants, you know, some plants thrive in humidity, but most of our veggies need airflow. So we've got to have a little bit of understanding of what's going to happen as we transition through this growing season. Any questions so far?
No.
So really, we're looking to time our seedlings properly, starting them indoors if we need to for doing early season stuff. But at this time, if we're planting tomatoes and peppers by seed, our timing is off. We're too late. We should have done that a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, depending on what we're wanting to do. So some things at this point in stage, if we haven't started them by seeds, we're going to need to worry about getting transplants so that our timing is correct. A lot of our items we're going to direct sow straight into the soil. We don't need to seed them in trays or such beforehand. We can direct sow and get a stronger, healthier plant as long as we understand our seasons and we know what temperatures we're looking for. Most stuff here in the warm season is going to want 65 and above consistently. We also need to understand timing and planting, because as we get into that latter part and we understand the timing of season change, that might lead us to understand that we need to protect some of our crops, even though they are full sun, because full sun here is not the same as everywhere else. It's extremely hot. The coastal region here is hot, the sun is brutal, so we might need to provide shade even to a plant that needs full sun. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we go. And maybe when I find my clicker. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is cleaning up. Simple concept, but we need to assess our space. So the first thing I do is I like to go out. I did this the other day. I went out. I really just took a long look at what was still in my beds, in my space, and determined, number one, obviously there's things that are dead. We just went through a freeze. So I know those things are going to go away. But I also need to assess, are some of those going to come back? And are they items that I want to stay? Things may come back from the root later on, and those plants are going to be hardier and stronger. They're going to be more acclimated to stress than others. So some things that died back to the root, I might leave. In this instance this year, I didn't really have anything that I wanted to keep, so I removed it. But I'm going to talk about how we remove it very specifically to make sure that our soil stays healthy and alive. I also need to look at what's in there that still is alive. Do I want to keep it? Am I planning on utilizing it? Is it something I'm going to continue? For instance, like herbs. We have a handful of herbs that are year-round staples. Rosemary, dill, oregano, that we don't cover. They survive the cold, they do fine, and those stay. So I need to understand what space I do have, and it's important to know that because that's going to determine what else I plant where and when. So when I look at removing my plants, so we have, let's say, a dead plant or a living plant, and we don't want it anymore in the garden. So first instinct for most people is just yank it up and get it out of the way. You know, that's simple. That's just kind of the way that most people do things. We take a different approach. We're going to actually take our clippers, or in some instances, depending on how long the plant's been there, I had some peppers I had to get out the loppers for. But we're going to take those and we're going to cut them at the soil level, sometimes right below the soil level, and we're going to kind of cover it back up with soil. Anybody have any idea why we might do that?
Keep the root system in the place.
Yep.
So that it keeps the soil soft and.
So attached a lot of times in a good quality soil, so you see I have on my drawing here, I've got, you know, my root system in purple, and then we have these green lines. This could be mycelium or beneficial fungal fungal microbes that have attached themselves to the root system to provide nutrients to the plant in trade for sugars. Those are going to need a new plant to attach to over time, but I leave it all intact so I don't disturb it, but I also leave that root system in there for those beneficial microbes to come in and break down those roots. That's going to provide me organic matter. It's going to provide me a way for the soil to somewhat feed itself, and I'm keeping a living soil. If I yank everything out and there's nothing there for bacteria to break down and they don't have something to feed on, then likely I might not have a good population of those things that I might want in my soil. And those are important. A healthy soil is said to not be possible without fungi and bacteria. Sterile soil is not beneficial because it can't break down, it can't work together with the plants. So we'll cut these off and we'll leave that in there and we'll cut it down. And we're going to use that to plant around. Does that make sense? All right. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to look at those items that are going to remain and determine, do we need to prune them up? Do we need to shape them? Have they gotten unruly? Are they eating up a lot of my real estate? So, you know, time to prune. We want to cut those back, shape them up, let them flush out with new growth, especially if they're scraggly or have any dead material from the winter cold. And we talked about removing already. And if I set this clicker down one more time.
Might need a little clip on it.
I usually put it in a little cup over there. But alright. So, next is going to be prepping the soil. There's a lot of components to prepping your soil. The first thing that I really need to do, I have these kind of backwards up here. I'm going to skip all the way to the end. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the consistency of my soil before I do anything. And what I mean by that, I want to be able to reach into the soil as far down as I can with my hands. And what is it like? Is it crumbly? Is it loose? Is it too loose? Is it not going to hold any moisture? Is the water going to just shoot right through it really, really quickly? If I hold it and I take it in my hand and I press it together, is it going to crumble apart lightly, or is it going to just hold together? That might mean that my soil is too dense. I might need a little bit of drainage amendment in there. So I want to look at my soil consistency because I want to make sure that water is going to move through it when it's excessive. I also want to make sure that oxygen can get into the root system because it's important for microbes and for roots. And I want to make sure that when I plant young plants that they have easy access for the roots to dig deep and go down. Because if it's hard, if you're hitting like big clumps or hard sections, the roots are going to hit it and then they're going to They're going to try to go around, and it's just going to stress the plant. Plants want the easiest path of least resistance. So the next thing I want to do is to potentially test my soil. How many of you test your soil in here? Anyone? So without testing our soil, we do one of two things. We put things in. How's it going, guys? We put things in there, such as lime, which is a commonplace that is put in there. It's an item that you think you need to put in. See it anywhere? So you place that in there, and over time, that lime changes your pH. And so if your pH is not right for the selection of plants that you have growing, then it's not going to allow the plant to easily have access to nutrients. You could have an abundance of minerals and nutrients in the soil, but if the pH is not right, it can't absorb all those minerals and nutrients. Secondly, we could just be fertilizing. You know, we think we need to feed the plant, all right? Well, if we're supplying too much of something that we already have excess of in the soil, I'm going to give you an example. The middle number in your fertilizer, phosphorus. By nature, our native soil here, if you take a soil test, usually will come back really, really elevated in phosphorus. It'll say very critical, meaning there's too much. So choosing fertilizers that have low phosphorus or slow release can be beneficial if you're planting in your native soil, because if we continue to apply lots of it, what will happen is there's a lot of these other micronutrients or items that can be bound up. And by bound up, I mean that are no longer accessible to the plant. Your plant's like it's there, but I can't use it. I can't get to it. So it's important to have a well-balanced soil, and to do that, you have to know where you're starting at. So even if you're doing raised beds and you started with pH balanced or sterile soil, and we can't control the environment, we can't control rain and acidity of water and all these other elements, but we can control what we put into it. And that will allow us to be more successful because, again, we might be putting too much of something that we don't even need. So soil test, whether it's a small kit you buy at the Lawn and Garden Center or you send it off to Texas A&M and get like a robust sheet that tells you more information than you might need to know, it doesn't matter, but you want to know where you're starting at. And I encourage you to at least test your soil once a year, at the least with a home kit, and just know where you are. pH, most definitely, because most people come in and they put these pH measurements in there, and their pH is just fine. And what will happen is they'll put it in, and it won't affect the season right now, but in 4 to 6 months when that pH swing has potentially happened, now they might have pushed their pH out of the optimal zone for what they want to plant, and then next fall garden is now crummy. So you got to think, it takes time for some of these things to take effect. So amending, when I talk about amending your beds or your garden, I'm more talking about like adding organic matter or compost. So compost is very similar to a slow release fertilizer. It's slow release nutrition. It's typically, it has some of that soil biome in it with bacteria and fungi, because those are things that were needed to actually create that compost. So they help us break down other larger particles in the soil and long term give us a healthier soil. So usually in a bed, I find that it's the easiest. And if you're doing raised beds, how many of us are growing in a raised bed? How many of us growing in ground? Okay, so we'll keep it to one topic here. So in a raised bed, we'll typically see that our soil level over time will break down, right?
Right.
And that's because the soil is a living thing. Microbes are living, they're breaking down the larger pieces, and it's becoming smaller, and the voids are getting smaller, and they're filling. So we need to top this up from time to time. We don't necessarily need to do that with soil. We can do that with compost. What type of compost is subjective to what works for you and what you think is the best. We could talk about different kinds, but everybody has an opinion about what works the best. For me, I like to use a combination of sources. There's no magic one. When you think about how compost is made, let's take composted manure. Manure brings nitrogen value, maybe other types of resources in there. Whereas like leaf mold compost is actually a bacterial compost, so it brings beneficial bacteria and brings microbe life into the soil. So oftentimes when I'm topping up my beds, I'm going to use a combination of maybe 1, 2, 3 different composts, and I'm just going to fill that void up, bring my level back up. And over time, that compost is going to, as it gets water, just like fertilizer, is going to work its way. Microbes, the beneficial aspects of it are going to work their way down into the soil that was previously there. And if you think about that over time, it's kind of like a layering method. Next season, that stuff is going to be a little lower, and I'm adding more. So I'm just basically topping up my nutrition level here. Does that make sense? So if we're adding organic matter back into the soil, then we're going to get into fertilizer. So we want to add some type of fertilizer to the soil. To me, it's always a two-part process. You know, there's people out there that only use liquid fertilizers, people out there that only use dry fertilizers. I think that they work hand in hand because they serve two different purposes. A dry fertilizer is going to feed the soil. It's going to feed it, if it's an organic, it's going to be slow release, and it's going to feed for a longer period of time. It's going to rely on microbes and soil life to break it down to make it available for plants. And oftentimes nowadays, your quality organic fertilizers have actually microbes packed into them, so you're supplying them back into the soil. So if you start out and you don't really have a nice living soil, you have the ability to populate that in there with a very robust fertilizer. You know, the two on the table here, Microlife and the Nelson Organic, are just two examples. I'm not married to any one type, but those are just great examples of a very robust organic slow release. So I bring this up right after amending because I can take that and I can work that into the top couple inches of my bed into that compost layer. And if my bed only needs a couple inches of volume, I can fertilize first and then cover it with my compost. I like to do that so that my fertilizer application stays evenly distributed across the bed, because the same thing applies. If I only put the fertilizer around the plant, it's going downward, right? This is a thing like an old time like row gardens. People are only fertilize the row. Well, over time, the root system gets deeper and wider. You want soil to be embittered because the fungi I talked about earlier, it can reach out and grab nutrients in areas where the root system might not be. So it's important to fertilize the entire area. And if I put that compost over it and hold it in place, then it's not going to float around when I'm watering or moving all to one side if it's not perfectly level. So it just kind of helps me keep it evenly distributed. The last thing that I want to do, if I have decent consistency in the soil and I'm adding my things in there, one of the things I can do is I can aerate. So there is an old tool called a broad fork. It's an old time farming tool. It's a handheld tool that's got some curved, look like little teeth. And they would step on it, press it into the soil, and rock it back and forth. So a broad fork was for aerating. It's for opening up the soil, allowing water, oxygen, nutrients to be able to get deeper. It helps relieve compaction. And even though we're all growing in raised beds and compaction is less of an issue, over time, soil is heavy. So is water. 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. And if you think about a rain that we get, how many gallons hit your small square footage of area during that time? So that pressure compacts over time. So aerating is something that we can do simply in a bed or even in the ground. We can do it with a hand tool. We can do it with a small shovel. We can really do it with anything simply by gently pressing it in, moving it back and forth, helping break up any clumps that are in the soil, and you're just allowing oxygen and such to get in there. You can do this even after you fertilize and amended. Some of that stuff will kind of fall into those cavities as you go, and that's okay. Any questions about soil prep?
Quick one, how deep do you want to get to aerate?
You could go deep as you want. I mean, I usually mostly do a hand tool because that's just what I have handy. Like I keep this thing with me all the time when I'm out there. So, I'll push it down as far as I can go, but it don't have to be crazy deep. I mean, most of the time I'm more concerned about that top layer because that's where my plants, especially when I'm working with seedlings or young transplants, they're not gonna be way down at the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
And some of these amendments we're doing, as they break down and they work their way through, they're gonna help keep those lower levels looser and more uncompacted over time.
Gotcha, thank you. What do you call that tool?
This is a hori knife. It's a soil knife. There's a bunch of different brands out there, but it's just some of them I use this to cut bags open. It has a ruler on it for planting depth. That's how I do all my transplants.
Not
Just
that good.
stab, rock, plant, cover. It's really, really quick and efficient. My favorite tool. It's the only tool I need out in the garden, really.
When you're using grow bags, should you also use gradual slow release and liquid fertilizer?
Yes, because a grow bag is going to be very similar. It's going to be just like any other container. And when the container doesn't have the natural soil to hold the nutrients in, as you continue to water, the nutrients are going to seep out.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing about a grow bag is the roots are going to be more evenly distributed because a grow bag can breathe. So aeration is not that important in there because the grow bag aerates itself by allowing oxygen all the way around. But because nutrients in your water are going to be seeping and flowing out all sides because it's porous, you're going to need to feed with a liquid to help keep that nutrition up.
And should you put the bags on top of anything, or can they just sit on the ground?
They can just sit on the ground. All right. Next is going to be planning. Such a simple concept, right? How many of us actually plan what we're going to put where each season?
I do.
If you're like
I'm
me,
in the middle of a rotating crop.
I'm the worst. I'm the worst about this because I'm trying to plant my garden amongst everything else and doing stuff like this. My days of planning are here.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I don't follow my own advice because I really just don't have time.
Mm.
But I'm very good about taking mental notes and I remember the things that I've done. So it doesn't have to be written, but you got to have some kind of a plan because there's some key things that will help us if we do plan and we take a moment to stop before we just throw it in there. So the first thing that I encourage people to do before they get out there this season is just to go out there and just observe your space. Whether it's empty, whether it's got stuff in it, observe. Where's the sun hitting it at? What beds are going to be stressed more than others based upon heat, sunlight? That's going to cause one to dry out faster than the other. Think about things that you can do and plan to mitigate some of these problems that might happen so it makes it easier on yourself and the plants become less stressful. Next, we're going to talk about, you mentioned like rotating.
Mm-hmm.
If we're planting our crops in the exact same space every single time, then we are going to build up disease and pest pressure. The good example of this is when we talk about nightshade family, potatoes, tomatoes, they are susceptible to late and early blight. If you get blight, it comes from the soil, and blight is not curable. You can't just go put something out there and eradicate it. So what we want to do is we want to mitigate that by moving our crops around and planting them in different places each season. Not every single time, but we want to make a rotation. Most people will tell you that in crop rotation, a 3-year cycle is the most ideal. For some of us, that's not feasible. We may only have a couple beds, but even moving back and forth, flip-flopping, is better than absolutely nothing. Next, I want to consider layout. Layout's important because am I actually utilizing my space to its fullest potential? And everybody grows differently. Everybody has success in different ways. So some of us, like myself, like to cram a lot of things in there. But I can be successful that way. I get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Those that might want like really, really high production of one thing may grow more of it. But if we put all of our eggs in one basket and we plant one crop in one bed with nothing else, we can leave ourselves susceptible for our whole crop to be a target to pest versus splitting up, say, half our tomatoes over here, half over here. Just, kind of making it, because I've seen this a lot. I'll do tomatoes on one side and the other. And some years I'll have pests over here and not over here. But I know once I see it here, I can take care of it, and I know that I need to start paying more attention to this. And just because you have it on one plant doesn't mean that they're going to be on every plant. You can have aphids on one pepper plant and not one over here, because this one might be more stressed than this one over here. This one maybe have access to a lot more nutrients. The soil's in better condition. This one does not. So pest and disease can tell us a lot about the environment and what's actually happening in the soil. So when I talk about layout, I personally like to plant a lot of things in one bed. I like to mix it up a whole lot. And you can mix it up as little as you want, but the key thing to look at is like, think about what you want to plant and how big does it get? How much space around and how much space and height do I need? So I kind of have a really, really terrible sketch up here, if you can decipher it. But a good example, let's say I have a 4x8 bed and I can only access it from 3 sides. So I'm instantly going to put my tall crops on the back. I'm going to use it to vine with maybe peas, green beans, or cucumbers, something that I can trellis and use that vertical space. Then I might plant peppers or something medium height in the middle where I can still reach behind them to get to my trellis. And then I'm going to start up in the front with low-lying crops. They may be, I could do root crops, early spring root crops. I can do green onions. Another one that I like to do, my terrible illustration of green beans. I like to do bush green beans at the very front edge of my beds, hanging out, because they're not taking up a lot of space inside the bed, and I can plant other things bordered behind them, and I'm still getting tons of production, easy access. I'm not having to dig through the beds, and I can just see them, lift them up. Hey, there's some, pick them. So just some ideas that you can utilize. But within this, it's also important that not only do I just not plant vegetables, I need to incorporate herbs and flowers. And if I can't incorporate them into my bed, or I don't want to put them in the same bed, I need to incorporate them very, very close by in that space, whether it's containers. It doesn't matter. But you want to have shapes, colors, sizes of flowers, because that's going to bring you diverse pollination. It's going to bring in potentially beneficial predators. If you think about, I would take the honeybee. Everybody associates pollination with a honeybee, right? A honeybee is not the most efficient pollinator for your garden, and they're not always going to be the only pollinator you get. It's what most people associate with pollinating a garden, because that's oftentimes all they see.
Got wasps.
Yeah.
Wasps are good pollinators too.
And that's because if you don't, not every insect can use the pollen and nectar from every single plant. A good example, we're coming up on it, pine pollen season's coming. Pine is the most prevalent pollen in southeast Texas as we get into this time of year. Honeybee can't touch it. It doesn't have enough protein in it. It's not usable to them. So every insect has kind of its mainstay food source. Good example, what's the monarch caterpillar eat? Milkweed, the Gulf fritillary caterpillar, passion vine. So every pollinator has things that have the necessary nutrients for them to complete their life cycle. So if we only have a very minimal amount, we're going to see a minimal amount of pollinators. I usually put flowers in the pockets, corner pockets of my bed. I'll do like a trio or maybe like a 6-pack of flowers, space them in there kind of tight. I'll make sure I have a little bit of color in each bed, and then we'll plant flowers in every open space or understory of all the fruit trees that not fruit trees, but they're blueberries and blackberries. Tons of flowers up around that. Just trying to get a wide range of things. Lastly, I wanted to plan kind of about like, what am I going to do as we get into this time, where we're transitioning. A lot of our spring stuff is still growing, but it's getting hotter. A good example of this is when we get to about this time, you step outside for the first time as a human, and it's humid and it's hot, and you're just like, man, I don't want to be out here. Your plants don't want to deal with that either. I mean, they can survive, but they get stressed just like we do. So providing shade, put on a hat when you're outside to keep the shade and the sun off of you. Plants are very much like us in a sense. They want to be protected to thrive. So creating systems that can help protect them, shade barriers, can help retain more moisture, even watering. There's so many different benefits to actually having a plan versus hoping for the best. I'm gonna watch a couple quick videos, and this is kind of this is 2.5 years ago when we first really dove into starting this garden that we have at home. This particular garden in this video, we had 53 species of plants in a space that is probably not much bigger than this room. It's narrow, spread out. It looks bigger than it actually is, but
so diversity in your garden is one of the most important things that you can do. So many times you see people planting just big blocks of single crops. Taking a look at the garden you're seeing here, there are plenty of different species, including veggies, herbs, different flowers of shapes and sizes. Creating a diversity is going to allow you to attract better pollinators, predators that can take care of unwanted pests, and just creating a more diverse ecosystem in your garden.
this is kind of my style. It's kind of chaotic. It's not true what they call chaos gardening nowadays, but we've got flowers all along the walkway under our berry bushes, and you saw this was in the very spring, so a lot of the flowers hadn't fully bloomed, but we had lots of color and pockets of color in every single bed. We had herbs in every single bed because those things are going to bring in the pollinators. Herbs, specifically your parsley family, fennel, cilantro, dill, parsley, those are going to be your mainstays. Those are ones that I will recommend having all the time. So why do we want to do this? Let's skip to the next one. So in a matter of 20 minutes, that same season, we found over 23 different beneficial or common stay things that used to in our old garden where we didn't have this kind of diversity, we would rarely find anything, especially not pollinators. Went outside, we just looked, observed, counted all these different beneficial bugs, natural, native species like the fertilizer caterpillar, swallowtail that you see kind of behind there. So creating this diversity helped us have beneficial predators and pollinators being actually produced in the garden along with our production.
So if you saw the diversity of plants in our previous video with all the different herbs, flowers, colors, shapes and sizes, and veggies, you can see what the result of that is. Here we have so many different things happening. This was all in one day that we found these different insects. We found Gulf fertility caterpillars, swallowtail caterpillars. We saw solitary bees, wasps that were picking up worms that were doing damage onto our plants. We found a few assassin bugs. All this goes to show that instead of putting large blocks of singular species plants, mix things up by shape, size, color, height, and create a diverse environment that is prone to attract a wide variety of pollinators, beneficial predators that can make you more successful in the garden.
So everything in that video had a benefit. The black and red spiky caterpillar, that's a fertility caterpillar. So native butterfly species, eats the passion vine. We had the swallowtail, that's on the dill. I grew dill specifically. I I don't really like dill. I don't like pickles. I have more dill than I could ever use in my lifetime from this one plant, and that same plant put out dozens of caterpillars that they were able to feed and get what they need to in turn become swallowtails. So we had assassin bugs, which are going to take care of small soft-bodied insects like aphids, whiteflies. So you have predators. We had solitary bees. They look like little mini wasps, but they're very efficient pollinators because they're very specifically located in a region where they live, and they're more apt to be able to pollinate things that we have in our area. You also had like the red paper wasp. You know, nobody likes a wasp, but a wasp is one of the most efficient predators that you can get. So we actually typically, in our passion vine, it gets so big, and I grow it on an obelisk, and I keep it cut back because it could be 20 foot long. But I'll usually have a giant wasp colony grow inside that I can't see or get to. And I'm not scared to have my kid running around there, running through it, because they've created themselves a habitat that is out of my way. They don't bother me. I'll watch them fly into plants and go hunting for worms and caterpillars, and we will constantly see them picking them up and flying off with them and feeding on them. So something as simple as what we would consider a nuisance pest is an immense beneficial predator that we can have in the garden. So just kind of goes to show you that a lot of the things that you commonly see are not always bad. So if we're going to seed anything part of our planting stage, we got to make sure that we understand when it needs to go in the ground. So before you leave today, if you don't have planting guides, or this is kind of the rule of thumb, it's kind of the same one that's been going around Southeast Texas forever, but it gives you the rule of thumb time frames that ideally you want to put something in the ground. Now, because the climate here is so off the wall, it's not always dead on. You may not be able to use this for exact timing.
Did you have your dill in full sun or partial sun?
Mine was in filtered sun because it's the location is underneath oak trees, so it gets what would be considered full sun, but it's the equivalent of having some form of a shade cloth. And that might be why it didn't really die out completely in the freeze or die all the way back to the root, because I don't typically get a lot of frost in my garden because of the oak canopies. So seeding, we've got to know when to seed. We talked about, like, if you're going to do peppers and tomatoes, we've already kind of missed that window. So we'll have a lot of people come in right now that are wanting to buy tomato and pepper seeds. They're going to plant them, and the plants are going to grow. They're going to look fine. They're going to put on some flowers. And the problem is they're not going to set fruit because the timing is off. So as we move into the season, we have things like cucumbers and squash that we can plant. We also need to understand how long it takes for things to germinate. And we're not going to get into all the specifics today, but today's day and age, we can look something up very quickly to find any missing information we have. A cucumber seed, I can't tell you how many people want to plant cucumber plants. A cucumber seed will germinate in 4 to 5 days, maybe even sooner if it's warm enough. So you can germinate these things, a lot of these items, right in the garden, in its home where it's going to stay. It's going to prevent you from having to deal with transplant shock or losing transplants, and you're eliminating a step that you might not need. So cucumbers, I can seed them right into the space along the trellis. They'll pop up and they'll grow, and I never have to do anything. And they're going to be happier, healthier, because they start living in the space they're going to stay in. I'll backtrack a little bit. If you like to grow eggplant by seed, being in that same family as tomatoes and peppers, you want to shoot 4 to 6 weeks before it's time to plant it. Eggplant's going to be a late season spring crop. It hates wind and it hates cool temperatures. We can take them off the plant truck whenever I have people chomping at the bit to plant them in March, and March is typically very windy here. Pull them off in the trays and they'll wilt from the time I pull them out of the trailer and I make it to inside the store, because we can't put them outside. So some things don't tolerate our early spring, but they could go in later on. So if you want to plant something like that by seed, you can transplant them indoors early, but 4 to 6 weeks before you're ready to put them out. So kind of now would be a great time to start eggplant. So kind of before we ever like really did any of this, my slides are backwards this year in a sense, but you know, we have all these things, and most of us here have a garden. But honestly, like, how many of us actually stop and take a moment to look at what we actually have and determine, do we have everything we need to be successful this season? You know, are my beds in fully working order? You know, if I have wooden beds or beds that I made, do I need to make repairs? Because once we start planning, we're not going to do these things, and later on down the road, they can become of detriment, and they might make us not be able to finish out the season strong. So at the beginning, I like to start, and I like to look at everything. Are my beds in order? I make a kind of a punch list of what needs to happen. I know whether I'm going to need to fill my beds up and amend. Do I have any broken tools? Are my trellises in order? Do I have stakes? Do I have, if I'm growing determinate tomatoes, do I have right-sized cages that are actually fully functional? Are they going to work? Because if I don't have them early on, and I get busy and I wait too late, what happens trying to put a cage or some support on a tomato? I know it's impossible, and then they're growing all over the ground.
Yes.
And you know, they'll grow, but it creates more hassle, more work, more issues that I could have prevented had I had all my stuff to go ready to go when I put them in the ground. So for me, that's one of the things I truly do now. Starting last fall, I make sure I have everything before I put it in the bed, because I've learned my lesson one too many times in the past couple of years. Not having tomato stakes and stuff ready, and then I was like, I'll get it tomorrow at work. And you think like, oh, well, you just get it at work. No, I forget every single time. So making sure that everything's maintained. There's a lot up here, but really when it comes down to it, maintaining your stuff. You know, something as simple as like, do you have a pair of pruners that you use? Is it sharp? Because when you get out there and you start cutting on things that are living, that have living tissue, dull pruners makes a dull cut, makes a jagged cut. It might look perfectly fine, but that causes stress on a plant. I'll give you an example I gave everybody else earlier. You know, part of my living is mowing grass. I own a lawn company. If I go out there and I cut people's yards with dull blades every single week, that I'm stressing their turf, I can lead to patchy spots. I can lead to nutrient deficiencies because that grass is more stressed. It takes longer to recover by simple pruning because I didn't do something right and my tools aren't ready. I'm the world's worst about pruners. Like, you know, you got to remember to even bring them inside.
I got a bucket right there at my front door. I drop all my
I ate my
stuff
own
in.
words, and that's this year I bought a pair of pruners that won't rust and that have all replaceable parts. So whenever I mess them up, I can just order a piece to fix them, and I don't got to buy a new set no more.
Y'all sell those.
We do. They're expensive as all get out, but that's the best of the best in pruners. Are worth every penny because you can get new blades for them. That's one thing I hate about pruners. You cut too many seasons and they get notches in the blades. They don't want to stay sharp. And get a new pair of blades for those and keep on trucking. So we get everything planted and we've moved on a little bit, and we're talking about spring preparation. Part of that preparation earlier I mentioned about thinking about systems that can help alleviate stress in your garden. Couple things that you can do right out of the gate that I always like to have ready. Number one is mulch. What's mulch do for the soil?
Keeps it soft. Keeps it moist.
Keeps some moisture.
Protects
What's the second thing it does?
Protects from heat.
Protects from heat. It also protects from cold. It's like, it keeps the soil cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter. So you get better temperature regulation. That's really vital in the summer because if you can keep your soil from drying out as often, it gives your plants more access to nutrients evenly, and it keeps them from wilting, being stressed. And when they're stressed, they tend to eat up more resources in the soil. Wintertime, keep it warmer. A couple degrees difference can be all it takes to keep the root system alive, even if the top dies on a plant, and it can rejuvenate and come back. So one of the things that we can also do is we can cover our plants. How many of you have issues with something as simple as a good old-fashioned stray cat? Like, I got a whole colony of them around here, and every time I think they're gone, there's a whole new batch, and my raised beds back here are the ultimate litter box. So, the big wide beds, when they're not full, I have to cover them. I have to have a system in place. So I keep hoops over one of them, and I have another one that's kind of a dry fitted little cage that I have a net attached to, and I keep them covered with netting that can help keep birds, squirrels, and other wildlife pests out, but I keep them from getting in there and digging. At home, I'm going to be doing this more this season because I can't tell you, the squirrels, they never mess with any of the produce like they do with other people, but they always dig up my flowers. Like right whenever I get them going, they're looking good, and they dig it up, and I come out and there's a whole thing just laid over, and I replant it, and it's just this battle. We're going back and forth. So having something as simple as PVC pipes, which you can bend, stick them in the soil, just have them there, and you know when you can take your covering off when you don't need it, and you can put it on when you do. That's especially important if we're going to do really early plantings like tomatoes. I'm going to plant my tomatoes on Monday is my plan. Would have done it today, but it's going to be really windy tonight, so we're going to forgo that. But I know that if I plant them, I'm probably going to get some cool weather, so I want to be able to throw up a frost cloth and have that ready. So my frost cloth is still laying out there in an empty bed, ready to go if I need it. But I can also use those hoops, like I said, for netting. I can use it for maybe some form of a row cover to help keep things like squash vine borers, the moths from ever getting on my plant. So there's multifaceted uses for having a system in place that can help you protect your plants and really achieve what you want. And some people build a row cover. Well, a row cover might keep pollinators out. That's very true. So you have to kind of weigh what's important to you in your space and make those decisions. Because no matter what you do, whether it's netting, row covers, frost cloths, everything has a pro and a con. Lastly, shade. I can use some of this same thing for a shade cloth. We're going to be building basically we're going to put some posts in the ground of our garden this year back here behind the office, and I'm going to run some cables, and we're going to have a shade cloth. We're just going to run it through the grommets, and when we don't need it, we're going to slide it back so it can get full sun on weather like now where it's not super hot. It's not as detrimental, but when the summer comes, I'm going to drag that sucker over, and I'm going to protect my plants. A good example of this is we had some people last year that took my advice. They put up a shade cloth over some of their more delicate items, and they extended their season. The plants were less stressed, and it happened to overhang some of their okra. And they also had okra planted in another location that was not under a shade cloth. And okra is a heat-loving crop. It can take dry, hot conditions. It's going to grow in that hot season when not a lot of other things are, but that okra produced more under the shade cloth than the ones that were not. So it goes to show you, even a plant that can handle high stress times and grow with a little bit of stress relief, it's going to be happier and could provide you more. So we can kind of go back and look like in a full circle sense. If we have systems, if we have diversity, if we have a lot of different plant species of different shapes and colors, we ideally are creating a natural pest control system. Now, is it going to keep every and all pests out? Absolutely not. That's unnatural. Pests are part of growing. They're part of nature. We're always going to have something. But what we can do is we can use what we know and we learn to mitigate some of those things to allow us to get what we want. So row covers, shade cloths, simply just going out and observing once or twice a week. Even if you don't have any tasks like watering or planting, just spending a little time, 5-10 minutes walking through, looking for things that kind of throw you off or that don't look normal. Also taking early pest strategy, encouraging beneficial insects from the beginning with that diversity. Not waiting until damage is severe. You start seeing a little bit of damage, there's two kinds of people. There's people like myself who are going to see minor damage and they're going to be like, okay, hey, we got a problem. Let's figure out where it's at, what it is, and why. Then you have people that see one little hole in the leaf and then they have enacted World War III on their garden and they're coming to find what can I kill the worms when in truth there might only be one or two. So even in large scale agriculture and business sides of things, like for the lawn care industry, putting a actual chemical product, organic or not, is always supposed to be the last part of the strategy. It's if all other systems and inputs have failed, then I do that. And the last stage to that pest control system is, does the need for spraying outweigh getting rid of the plant? A lot of times, if you notice, some plants get really, really, really stressed at the latter part of their life when they're cycling out. So sometimes, like tomatoes, if I start getting a bunch of like hornworms late in the season, and I've gotten a mass majority of my production, or if it's a determinate and it's produced its stand, and I think, oh, it's still flowering, it's going to make more, but it's really not, I'm better off to eliminate the plant and move on to something else in that space than spraying. But if I do have to spray, I'm going to lean towards natural options. BT is one I have up here. You can use it from caterpillars or on the plants. If I can't get rid of the caterpillars by hand, or it's a species that comes in large quantities like hornworms or army worms, I'll spray with something that's going to have the least toxicity and the less chance of putting toxins into
Your food.
my food. So that's again why, for me, why would I be growing food and wasting all this time and money? You know, I do it because I just love growing things. I told them earlier, a lot of what I grow never makes it to the table. But I use it as a learning. I get to observe. I get to see every life cycle of what happens. But essentially, the key thing here is early planting whenever we can. All the things before can help us create a pest control system without the use of chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Last year we were successful in using absolutely zero chemicals, organic or not. So probably the first season I've been successful even with caterpillars, but that's kind of the end goal. I don't want to be putting anything out if I don't have to. It's kind of back where planting early gives us the jump start. We have the systems in place on something as simple like tomatoes. I put them out whenever everybody says it's too cold. They start growing, they're looking good. I'm getting ahead of the pests that I know are going to come when we hit that warm weather, like the stink bug.
Oh, I hate the stink bug.
Leaf-footed stink bug is the number one enemy for growing tomatoes, and they will be here right around May to early June when the heat sets in. So if I can get most of my production before then, then I can eliminate my need to deal with those, because even spraying with a chemical is worthless. It doesn't help.
But I found sunflowers, stink bugs like sunflowers. So I would spray them out of my tomatoes with the organic, and they would go to the sunflowers and stay on the sunflowers.
And a lot of pests like stink bugs, even like manual removal, like you go out there, bring you a bucket of soapy water, get you a cheap hand vacuum. You know, if you don't want to touch anything, you know, if you can capture them or knock them off into like soapy water, the surfactants will kill them, and you're removing them from the environment. And insects, especially like a stink bug, is multi-generational. At the end of the season, you know, we see the stink bugs go away visually, but they're still there overwintering. And the more we can remove from an environment, the less population we may have in our little locale of our house or homestead. You know, doesn't mean they can't come from somewhere else.
That's right.
But we're removing them from the environment, and we're breaking the life cycle. And that's important in pest control.
Now, I get ladybugs every year. I've had ladybugs since I've lived in my house. And I had them in January.
We had ladybugs come this year and eat all the aphids off of hibiscus. But it's all about, you know, a lot of this diversity that I talk about. You're creating shelters and habitats.
For those.
Natural pest control does not happen. You know, people that want to they buy like ladybugs and they release them out there. If you don't have habitats, water, and resources for them, what are they going to do?
They're going to fly.
They're going to move. Like, they're going to stay. It doesn't matter. Just because you have one plant that has a little bit of a problem doesn't mean they're going to stick around and take care of it. They're looking for a place to make a habitat. You know, and then as they populate, they're going to spread out and grow. So it's very important that you create this little mini ecosystem so that you can have a place. Like that's the first time ever we had tons of ladybugs, and we didn't do anything. They
Right.
just came naturally.
Yes.
But it's because, in my mind, the things that I've showed you today allowed for that to happen.
Yes.
Whereas any other time, one here and there on a fluke, but not doing anything. They were actually eating the insects, and it was awesome.
Yes. When I see the ladybugs, I know it's time to start getting ready to plant.
Yeah. You know, amphibians.
Yes, frogs.
Amphibians are great. Frog habitats, water. This little guy lived in my little drain box for a long time. In this picture, he's actually stuck in the grate. He jumped out, and I had to get him out. And having, easily accessible water sources, places to hide for simple things like this. These guys are natural pest control. They don't do anything. They don't hurt anything. They're already around. So inviting things into the garden. We have a bird feeder in the garden. I feed the birds. I don't have problems with them eating my stuff. I give them water. I give them resources, and they feed on insects. They take care of things. Bees. We have a little tray or a pottery dish with rocks and marbles, and we keep, every time I go out and water, I make sure my pollinator water dish has water in it. They need water too, just like us.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever had a swimming pool and you see the red wasp cruising on over to the pool, or the dirt dauber, they need water too.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the scale of like my little space here and a big fisheye lens, but you can see all kinds of stuff happening here. I used to have the shade of this once beautiful magnolia, now it's gone, so we're revamping this year because now we have full sun hitting. So this is going to be a new season for me, and now I have to step back and observe my environment differently because I lost a beneficial aspect of my landscape. Just colors. Got honeybee, things like salvias, flowers. Even if you're not a flower person, you don't care, put them out there. I'm not a big flower person, but I love having them so that I can watch things fly around and do their job. As we get close to the end here, some common mistakes that people make: planting too late, like I mentioned, losing crops to the heat by having their timing off, overwatering in cool soil. When you're getting out there and you're doing your preparation, watering changes as this art changes. You water less when it's cool, more when it's warm, more when it's hot, and then you go back to the other way. Put your hands in the dirt, feel for moisture, water long and infrequently at the soil level. That way you promote deep root growth, healthier plants, versus watering overhead, getting minimal water, having shallow roots, and plants that are stressed as we move into that warm season. Fertilizing too heavy early, that's a common practice whenever people are doing like synthetics or quick release fertilizers. When you're dealing with a lot of organics, you're not really fertilizing heavy up front because it's not all going to be accessible. We need the microbes to get in there and break it down, make it accessible. Now, fertilizing too early with a liquid can be problematic. Usually I'll wait on my liquids until my plants get up and going, and then I'll start giving them a little bit of a boost as we go. Failing to rotate crops. We talked about earlier, pest and disease, that just makes our chances of getting those higher every season we plant in the same exact space. Waiting too long to install shade. Sometimes the plants are more delicate than we think, and it's not super hot yet, but having it ready, you can play with that and find the best time to put up shade and help mitigate some of that water absorption or water runoff and just stress that's going to go onto those plants. Lastly, not necessarily ignoring early pest scouting, but just ignoring the fact of taking the time to go out and look and observe. Most people don't really, I don't find a lot of people spend a ton of time out there when you don't have a physical task to do. And I found that's the most important part to me, is just going out there, taking a walk through, looking around, and making a mental note or writing down what I see, because it helps me figure out what worked and what didn't. Put your little checklist in the handout this year of all the things that I've talked about today. Pick and choose the ones that make sense for you, and review over these when you get home this season as we're getting ready, because it's time. Spring's here, or some people call it false spring is here. But I'm going all in.
Too.
I'll take the risk, and if I fail, then I'll just be.
I did good last year following your advice. My tomatoes were delicious, and I had a lady want to buy my tomatoes. They were so good.
Awesome. Final thoughts, really for me, success starts before you ever even start. It starts with thinking about what worked and what didn't. Because again, life is fast in this day and age, especially for us that have kids, family. Take the time to observe, prepare things, repair things, and you will be more successful with a little bit of proactivity as we go into this year. And that's my spiel. You can find, if you want to rewatch this or the other one from this morning may have something different in it. Recordings of all the classes are now on the YouTube channel. We have a podcast that runs every Tuesday, and then also every Thursday I do a short episode. So I'm throwing out lots of information out there, trying to embed myself so that I can help you be more successful.
So your podcast is the Compost Pod?
Yep.
Okay, and you find it on YouTube?
YouTube, the podcast you can find on any platform as well, just for listening. It's on every platform pretty much imaginable. So you can listen to the audio, the video is up, and I do videos 4 or 5 times a week of, just kind of relation to the classes. I'm passing through work and I see something that speaks to me, or it's something that I know people ask a lot about, I'll stop and I'll make something. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos coming up just about different plant species, specifically fruits, ones that work well, pros and cons, and not every one of these things are things I'm planting myself, but I'm going to give you the lowdown of the information that can help you make a decision, whether it's something you want to do. So, any questions today?
Have you ever, my grandpa or my uncle used to, when he would plant his garden, he would have several areas. He would always leave one of them covered and, just bare for a season. The next season he'd plant that, leave another one bare.
There are people that do that. I'm not a fan of leaving bare ground.
Okay.
So, let's think about, think of an instance when you had a spot somewhere, whether it's not necessarily in the garden, or think like in your yard. Say you had a bare patch of grass, or where the ground was bare. What happened in that bare patch?
Weeds.
Mother Nature is going to cover the soil.
Right.
It's natural. So, and the first thing that's going to happen are things that can easily be blown in or planted by wildlife, and they're going to be the things that are maybe great plants for some things, but anything is a weed if it's unwanted in an area. And the last thing I want in my garden is an infiltration of weeds. So if you want to rest an area in a sense, rest it with a cover crop. So let's say you have a section. Let's say most times people have barren spots in the winter time. Not everybody plants a big winter garden. Some people don't plant a winter garden at all. But you could go in and you could see crimson clover. Crimson clover is a nitrogen affixing legume. So it's going to grow. It's going to produce flowers. It's going to provide benefit to the ecosystem around in that wintertime. And when it comes time for its life cycle to end, you chop it, and it will have pulled nitrogen out of the atmosphere, and it puts it into its root system in these little bitty balls. And those balls will begin to break down. The microbes will begin to break down that root system, and you're putting nitrogen and replenishment back into the soil without leaving your ground bare. So there's ways you can do cereal ryegrass. Cereal ryegrass is used to combat root knot nematodes. So there's different things that you can put out there that can help keep the soil active, alive, and from getting just overrun with weeds.
Okay.
Or things that you don't want that might. One of the common ones I like to keep something growing, especially if you're growing in the ground. One of the most common ones that gets in gardens is nutgrass. And nutgrass is the most invasive thing you can deal with, and you can't spray nutgrass weed killers in there. So by keeping dense plantings and trying to eliminate bare soil and having good drainage, ideally I can eliminate some of those things from getting in there or ever getting to a point that's too big of an issue.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. What else?
Can you tell me those again, what was it, clover?
Crimson.
Crimson clover,
And-
cereal ryegrass. So cereal ryegrass is like, ryegrass people think, oh, like ryegrass for a lawn. No, cereal ryegrass is the equivalent of like rye that would be used to make like liquor or make like a rye-based flour or anything like that. So it's actually a grain.
Gotcha.
What else? Anybody?
So what about there's patches of clover, and I don't know what kind they are, but they have a runner,
Yep.
and they pop up all in the grass.
Clover is a cool season item. Clover is one of those like people come in and like they're like, oh, it looks so terrible. By the time you're actually actively outside in the spring all the time, clover is going to be on its way out. It's a cool season crop, but the benefit to clover is it's a nitrogen fixer. So it's going to grow in areas that maybe are nitrogen deficient. It supplies its own food. It doesn't rely on the soil to feed it to grow. So when that clover dies out, that root system dies out and puts that nitrogen back into the soil. So it's a great additive. Like I don't care if clover grows in the yard.
Okay.
I think it looks pretty good.
Mhm.
Especially
I like clover.
You know, it
And
doesn't
the
grow
bees
everywhere.
like it.
Yeah, and it's also a great source as we warm up for bees. White clovers are really good for that kind of stuff.
We have some that have the little flowers that we used to get as kids and make necklaces with, and then the other was like a running, but it's kinda like, my yard is awful. I had 22 trees on 2 acres that I lost in Rita, and I've lost a 100-year-old oak tree. We're losing just about all the trees.
Yeah.
So what used to be shaded and is no longer. But my yard, from running heavy equipment to get those trees off the house twice.
Yep, it's just kind of the same principles apply here, like compaction, aeration can help eliminate a lot of that and help root systems and other plants thrive. Weeds oftentimes will grow. I tell this all the time. If you look at a weed can tell you a lot about your soil. If a weed grows with a taproot,
Yeah.
what might that tell you? It's growing one singular thick root straight down.
The soil's dense.
Soil's dense, it's compacted, it's like a drill bit. It's burrowing its
Okay.
way through. It can't effectively put
Outwards.
wide roots outward. So taproots will often indicate you have some compaction. It may not be fully compacted, but there's compaction in this area. Whereas if you've ever dug in a shady spot, or maybe you pulled up a weed out of the yard and you look and it's got fibrous roots and you dig it out and all the soil comes out attached to it.
Yes.
What does that tell you?
Rich right there, that can spread out and grow.
But it means your soil is too loose. So those fibrous roots, that weed is growing in that location naturally. That's the type of environment it needs, but it can tell you that, hey, my soil is going to wash out here because it's too loose. That means that the soil can drain too fast, so it's holding the soil in place. So it's the total opposite. So we're looking for something in the middle, where we get roots that are not completely fibrous and dense, but like this, something that spans out. So it's interesting that plants can tell you a lot of things about what's actually happening. Any other questions?
You ever heard of marigolds? It's like a snake bug.
Yeah, French marigolds are great for companion planting.
Great.
They put off I can't remember the actual
Basil's a good
compound,
one, too.
but it puts off basically like an aroma that disrupts insects' receptors. So it's kind of like, have you ever heard of like putting out like mint for like rodents? It's the same concept. You're making an unfavorable environment for the pests. Like most pests use their senses to locate and move around. Same thing with spiders. They sense things. So you make up an unfavorable condition, then it's not going to kill them. It's going to make them want to go somewhere else, ideally. not always foolproof, but having those things, like, that's why I think herbs are very important, because a lot of herbs, like basil and stuff, they put off a lot of those aromas that help act as natural repellents for certain pests.
We had tomatoes last year, and they were planted
I took
a foot and a half to 2 feet apart. It was like a jungle.
Yep.
But, and I had so many tomatoes, but I lost them to stink bugs. I mean, it was like trying to, they made themselves a colony.
And they're very, very multi-generational, so they come really, really fast.
Do they have any natural predators?
I do it myself. That's a good gift
Just
too.
me. Gotcha.
You.
So you infuse it
Like,
now.
I'll allow it to people, I bought my mom a handheld battery powered
Maybe
vacuum,
I
because
can
she
do
don't
this
wanna mess with them.
Christmas.
She goes out there and just sucks them
Yeah, I
up,
don't mind, I
opens
just,
it up, dumps it in a
Especially
bucket of
if it's
water,
not hanging
soapy
from
water, kills them off, works every time. You know,
I
but
guess I had,
Little vacuum you bought, the little green one?
I don't think it'll stop them. I use them as anger management. I feel like.
yeah, it is therapeutic.
And squish them, and it's like, here you get on my beautiful tomatoes and ruin them.
I got planting guides up here if you want planting guides. As always, there's seeds in the back if you want to take some with you. And I'll still be here if you got more questions.